Welcome. We're going to be taking a look at how we can do some Java database queries so we can do a further look at how to integrate Java and database information into our projects. So some of the vocab we have to make sure we talk about, we have the connection, indices, result set, metadata, and statement. If you have other vocab questions, of course, take a look at the videos that go along with this to see more information as you go through the process. So when we're processing a query, we've got to keep a couple things in mind. One of the things we have to very much keep in mind is the idea that processing query is vendor specific. Database vendors have different rules about writing queries. You have to make sure you keep that in mind for the actual queries you process. When we're talking about MariaDB/MySQL, you have database components often are surrounded by backticks. So you want to make sure you actually watch for that specifically, like, oh, backticks are how I identify these database components in that language. So watch for that, that's not anywhere else. When we're working with Microsoft, MariaDB, or MySQL, we have to tell exactly what database we're working with, the use command, so it's use and then database name. And so you want to make sure you use that with that. Then again, it's for those languages specifically. Oracle, on the other hand, has none of those previous requirements. You just simply write the queries for it, and it will give you access to it based on your login and password role combination that you're working with on that. Now, processing a query has a few steps we want to talk about. So the first thing we do is we create the connection. We use that connection and then create a statement. We execute the query. We retrieve the result set from that. We extract the result set metadata. We process the metadata. We then process the result sets, and we get the actual results and do with them what we want to do. So let's take a look at that. So creating the connection, we use the driver manager.getConnection method so we can create the connection instance with the connection string that's supplied from the project you're working with. And again, to maintain our secure and stable coding standards, that connection instance needs to be closed when finished. So we will put this inside a try with resources block to handle that work for us. We also use the connection itself to create a statement. The statement is where we execute information upon this. You can use parameters with that statement to make your result set easier to process. We'll see an example of that right here on our code sample here in just a second. So here we have our create connection statement component. It's in our try with resources block of our query. And you can see it's in the try with resources block of our method. And you can see I'm doing try, making a connection named current as equal to connect to Oracle, a static method inside the project, which returns a connection instance that I work with based on that connection string. And then I make a statement, and I do that by using the create statement method on this current connection. And I pass it result set type scroll insensitive and result set concur read only. So my concurrency is reading only on the data on it, and I can scroll in different directions through it instead of just going a one-way through single pass on that. By using that two-parameter method to create the statement. Now when we're executing the query, this is handled by the statement itself. The statement is what's responsible for executing that query, and it returns a Boolean value that can be used to determine if we want to proceed or not. Because, if the statement doesn't execute, then great, we'll skip past it, we'll move on. But if it does execute, let's go into it and see what happens. And then after we execute the statement, we need to retrieve the result set. This is a resource-based variable, so it also has to be closed via try block as well. And again, we handle that with the try with resources, so we can make sure we close that appropriately, or we have to manually close it ourselves, but hey, we've got try with resources. Use the tool that's built for it. It makes life easier. And so if we're going to look at the example code for that, we can see if the current statement.execute query returns true, then hey, we've got that. Then I'm going to try and generate the resource that we'll be using inside that block. Result set results is assigned the value of current statement.getResultSet. I know, creative variable names and creative method names make life so easy to figure out what we're working on. Now, the next step we want to do is process the result set metadata, the information about the information. The metadata is retrieved from the result set itself, and one of the most helpful methods on that is the get column count, because it tells us how many columns we have to worry about when we're working with the data set. I know, really helpful. We want to use a for loop to retrieve that header information. And remember, database indices start at 1, so you need to adjust your index values appropriately. It's really critical. You don't want to go out of bounds for a bad reason. So I'm going to retrieve and process the metadata right here. So I have a result set metadata headers is assigned the value of results.getMetadata. We saw that created inside the try with resources block earlier. I make a string array named columns where I create a new string array passing that get column count parameter. Like, oh, that's how big it's going to be. Great. And then for indexes 1, index is less than or equal to headers.getColumn_count index ++. This is what we're talking about, that indices. We start off at 1, we go less than or equal to the count we're working on. Very different from a standard for loop. Then column sub index -1 to go back to that 0th value, because in Java land we start off at indices at 0. So that's why that index -1 is there. Equals headers.getColumn name pass an index. So make sure you correctly match the indices on that thing, making sure when you're talking to the column-based information of the metadata or the result set itself, use the valid number of index and going up to less than or equal to column length. But when you're talking to the Java side, you want to make sure you start off at 0-based information. Take a look at that next loop right there. We have for indexes 0. Hey, that standard for loop approach is less than columns.length, okay? Index ++. And then printed results is equal to the pipe key plus column subindex, then a tab, and then if column length is less than is equal to dot length -1, I'm at the end spot right there. Then I append another pipe key and a new line to that, so it makes it look nice and pretty. And then I'll append the printed results and the divider with that as well. Now I want to process the actual result sets, the data, the meat of the information we're working with. And so result set is processed using the cursor, and the cursor starts before the first time in the result set. We use then the next method, which will progress the cursor through the data set as we go through, and it goes towards the end. And again, unless you know the exact data types that are involved, especially with the first time you're processing a data set, I recommend extracting the data as a string because it makes it really easy to process because everything can be turned to a string in Java. It makes life really nice. And again, when result sets as well, indices start off at 1 for the result set based components. So let's take a look at that right here. So as long as results.next returns true, we're going to go into this. For index is 1 less than or equal to columns.length, so I'm going to the right value on there. Print results plus equals, and the pipe key, the results.getString passing an index. And then if index is equal to columns length, then printed results plus equals, and then backslash, and then the value. So I'm appending that as a single string right there. So I start off again at 1, not 0, because I want to use a valid index for the result set on that information. Now the results I'm working with, whatever data type you want to work with to store those values, whether it's a string like I did in that sample before, or for simple, whether it's a string like that sample I just did earlier, or for more complex data type using a vector of some type for those objects, these values get appended while you're processing the result set, and they should then be returned so you can actually use them or process them externally. I know, crazy concept, but we want to actually get that data so we can use it. And so check for the end and finalize the results. If the results.last, if you're at the end, the results count plus equals results.getRow, and then another new line, and append to that divider line we just saw right there, and pass that to the result count as well, that variable we just calculated on that, and return that value to whoever's using it so you can actually get those results in and see how that works. Take a look at my videos where I actually go through the detailed example of how to use this data with the Java connection, and have a great time. See you next time. Again, bye-bye.